Chapter 53 Once Upon a Broken Heart. Evangeline spun around. The girl was about her age. Her face was round and her long black hair was tied back, giving a clear picture of a starburst mark the color of currant wine on her left cheek. "Who are you?" Evangeline asked. The girl was dressed as a palace servant in a little cap and a wool gown with a cream apron, although Evangeline wondered if the clothes were borrowed, for they were ill-fitting and she'd never seen this girl before. Her birthmark was something Evangeline would have recognized. "What's going on?" She reached for Jack's dagger, tucked into the belt of her morning dress. It had been seized from her during her arrest, but it was one of the first things she'd taken back. The girl held up her hands in a peaceful gesture, revealing, a tattoo on the underside of her wrist, a circle of skulls that reminded Evangeline of something that her overtaxed mind couldn't remember just then. "Havelock and I aren't here to hurt you. We have something we need to show you." Evangeline gripped her knife tighter. "Forgive me for being a little dubious on this front." "Prince Apollo is alive," announced Havelock. Evangeline shook her head. She believed in a lot of things, but not people coming back from the dead. "I saw him die." "You saw him poisoned, but it didn't kill him." The girl gave Evangeline a taunting smile, one part triumph, one part dare, to argue back. She was definitely not a servant, and Evangeline wanted to ask exactly who she was, but that didn't seem like the most vital question. "If Apollo is alive, then where is he?" "We've hidden him to keep him safe." Havelock stepped forward several paces and threw back a carpet to reveal a trapdoor that opened up to a flight of stairs. "He's down there." Evangeline gave him a spectacled look, but when Havelock and the girl both took to the stairs, leaving her free to go, Evangeline's curiosity got the best of her. She decided to follow. The flight of steps was mostly dark and her heart beat faster with every one. If Apollo was truly alive, then she was still married. They had a chance at a future she'd just been wondering about. She tried to feel excited, but if Apollo cared about her at all, why had he hidden in the palace as she'd been running for her life? She could understand if he were still upset from the undoing of Jack's spell. But hours ago his brother had almost killed her, and Evangeline would have definitely died the night of her wedding if it hadn't been for Jack's. Had Apollo not done these things, or did he think she deserved to die? As Evangeline neared the lower steps, she still hoped Apollo was alive, but it was a complicated sort of hope. Before, when she believed everything was a sign and her trip to the north meant finding her happily ever after, she would have been sure that there was a second chance waiting for her just a few feet away. Now she didn't know what to expect or even what she wanted. If Apollo gave her another chance, would she take it? Did she want him, or just a happily ever after she thought that he could give her? The last step creaked beneath Evangeline's slippers. The room beyond was small, with a low wooden ceiling and not nearly enough light. The air was stagnant and a little stale, and almost as soon as she entered, Evangeline wanted to leave. This was a mistake. Just past Havelock and the girl, Apollo was laying down on his back, but he didn't look right. He didn't look alive. Evangeline almost silently called for Jack to tell him she was in danger, but the girl quickly said, "Apollo's in a suspended sleep. I know he looks dead, but you can touch him." "Please," Havelock added softly. "We've been trying to revive him, but we think that you might be the only person who can bring him back." Evangeline wasn't even sure she believed Apollo was actually alive. He lay on the heavy wooden table, as unmoving as its corpse. His eyes were open, but even from the distance they were flat as pieces of sea glass. She still wanted to flee, but Havelock and the girl looked so expectant as they watched her. They weren't trying to hurt her or trap her. If she left, Evangeline would be running away from hope, not danger. Carefully she approached the table. Apollo was still dressed, as he'd been on their wedding night, in only a pair of pants. The oil had thankfully been wiped from his chest, leaving his amber pendant and the tattoo with her name. Gingerly, she touched his arm. His skin was cooler than a person should have been. His body didn't stir, but when she moved her hand to his chest after a minute, she felt it. Just one barely there beat. Her heart fluttered as well. He really was alive. How did the two of you discover this? And why does no one else know? Evangeline took another look around the room, which was better saved for the table with a pole and another small stand containing a water bin and some cloths. We didn't know who we could trust, Havelock said. I was there the night Apollo was poisoned. I was in the room with you after, when you wouldn't stop crying. It haunted me, made me think you might not be guilty. I knew that you had nothing to gain, unlike his brother. I didn't want to think Prince Tiburce had tried to kill Apollo, but when Tiburce became engaged almost immediately, a few other soldiers became suspicious as well. We borrowed Apollo's body from the royal morgue and reached out to Pathra of the damned at your service. The girl flashed another smile that made Evangeline think she should have recognized the name. Have you not heard of me? Pathra pouted. Pathra, get on with it, said Havelock. Someone will notice the princess is gone soon. Fine, Pathra huffed. I'm rather famous in some circles for having special talents. I can steal the secrets that people take to the graves. Havelock here thought that if I paid our Prince Corpse a visit, I might learn some of his secrets, including who killed him. But Apollo didn't have any secrets. And everyone has secrets, even if it's just a secret fear of caterpillars or a tiny white lie that's told to a neighbor. That's when we realized Apollo wasn't dead. Whatever toxin was used on him didn't kill him. It put him in this suspended state. What's a suspended state? Evangeline asked. It pauses life, Pathra said, unless he's revived. Prince Apollo could stay like this for centuries without aging. There aren't a lot of stories about it. It's believed Honora Valor used to use it as part of her healing for people who she couldn't help immediately. Unfortunately, no one knows how she did it or how to wake someone up from it. The practice of it was believed to have been lost with her death, but we thought you might be able to help. Pathra looked up at Evangeline, the same way people had looked at her right after she returned from the Beanstone, as if she were the hero the papers all claimed. Evangeline felt more worn out than heroic, but for the first time, she no longer felt the need to deny all the stories about her. What she'd done that day in Valenda had been courageous. Luz really had been under a spell, and she stopped him from marrying the girl who had cast it. Then Evangeline had turned herself to stone to save him and the rest of his wedding party. She might have mostly done it because she felt responsible for what had happened to them, but that didn't mean that what she'd done wasn't brave. Having faith was brave, but Evangeline wasn't sure bravery was enough to save Apollo. What did they think she could do for him? In some of her mother's stories, kisses could cure the same way that Jack's kisses could kill, and these kisses were almost known to always involve true love. Of course, these stories were also cursed, so who knew what was really true? I could try to kiss him, she said. Pastor gave her a tentative smile. Havelock nodded soberly. Evangeline moved her hand to Apollo's cheeks and pressed her lips to his. He tasted like wax and hexes, and she didn't move or change. Disappointment twisted inside her, but this was merely her first try. If she couldn't cure him with a kiss, perhaps she could find another way to heal him. Maybe she could go to Jack's. He had enchanted her kiss before. Maybe he could. Evangeline broke off. She'd forgotten that Jax had told her that there had never been any magic in her kiss. But what if he knew something? Maybe he could help her. She almost tried to ask him with her thoughts, but she stopped herself again. She couldn't repeat the mistake she made with Luz. She couldn't come promise to save Apollo. If Jax helped her, he wouldn't do it for free. Perhaps they weren't enemies anymore, but she couldn't forget what he was. At one point, she thought Jax had used her to kill Apollo, but he hadn't. Jax had nothing to gain by killing Apollo, and Tiburce had confessed. Of course, during his confession, Tiburce had also said that the poison he used, Lila's tears, was only supposed to work on females. And although Jax had nothing to gain by poisoning Apollo, he did have a great deal to gain by turning Evangeline into a fugitive and making another line of Valerie Arch prophecy come true. She will be both peasant and princess, a fugitive wrongly accused, and only her willing blood would open that arch. Evangeline tried again to push the thought away. She was being paranoid. Jax hadn't done this to Apollo for the prophecy. Tiburce had confessed. But what if Tiburce's poison really had only affected her? After Evangeline had kissed him, Apollo hadn't sobbed the uncontrollable way she had from drinking the tinted wine. What if Tiburce had poisoned Evangeline? But it was actually Jax who had done this to Apollo to turn Evangeline into a fugitive wrongly accused. Jax had said there hadn't been a magic to her kisses, but what if there had been magic in his blood? The first 2 times she tasted Jack's blood, it had been sweet, but on the day of her wedding, right before she kissed Apollo, Jack's blood had been bitter. It had scared her away, the ghost box. What if it was Jack's bitter blood that had done this to Apollo? Again she tried to bury the thought. The idea of it all turned her stomach, and yet Evangeline couldn't let it go. She wanted to hope that Jack wouldn't have gone this far. But he was a prince of hearts. According to the stories, he left a trail of corpses as he searched for his one true love. He would definitely go this far if it gave him what he wanted. And he wanted to make the prophecy come true. But this still didn't mean her suspicions were right. Earlier she'd been convinced Marisol was the killer. But looking back, Evangeline now wondered if Jax might have been manipulating her about Marisol as well. And not less flat, Jax had just happened to be reading the same spell book that Marisol owned, revealing that Marisol could be a witch. Jax had then taken Evangeline to Chaos' underground kingdom, where Chaos made it sound as if a witch had poisoned Apollo. Then Luz had confirmed that Marisol was a witch. Evangeline had almost been convinced of Marisol's guilt after that, but it wasn't until she'd seen the scandal sheet that Jax had been clutching, the one with Marisol's wedding announcement, that she'd been certain her stepsister was a killer. Maybe it was a handful of coincidence, but Marisol made the perfect scapegoat. If Tibris hadn't confessed and instead it had been revealed that Marisol put a love spell on Tibris, everyone would have been happy to believe that she'd also killed Apollo. But suddenly, Evangeline wasn't even sure that Marisol had been the one to put a spell on Tibris. Jax could have willed it to frame her. Was anything as she originally thought, or was everything Jax had done just to make the prophecy come true? But if Jax had done all of this, why had he left Apollo alive? Havelock cleared his throat, and Pathra gave Evangeline a curious look, both no doubt wondering why she was staring at Apollo's unblinking brown eyes. But Evangeline couldn't look away. She felt too close to figuring everything out. Pathra has said Apollo could stay this way for centuries, not aging, not moving, not quite alive, but not really dead. Just like Evangeline had been when she'd been turned to stone. Her stomach dropped. And in that moment she knew. Jax would know that Evangeline could not leave Apollo in this state. This was why Jax had left him alive. Apollo was Jax's bargaining chip. If Jax had done this to Apollo, then he could undo it, and Evangeline knew exactly what Jax would want in exchange for his help. Jax wanted her willingly blood to open the Valerie Arch, and she would have bet anything that this would happen to get it. He poisoned Apollo to manipulate her. Evangeline didn't know if she wanted to laugh or cry. She knew what Jax was. She hadn't been foolish enough to believe that she was different or special, and that he wouldn't destroy her. But maybe she believed it a little. She clearly believed it enough to spend a night with him inside a crypt. And just an hour ago she'd been terrified at the thought that Jax had been trapped in an enchanted sleep. She'd been ready to race to his rescue because she'd also been silly enough to think that something had changed between them that night in the crypt. When he told her the story of Donatella, she thought she understood him. She thought he was opening up, that he was just a little human. But she should have listened when he told her that he was a fate and she was nothing but a tool to him. Jax no doubt knew that she'd want to save Apollo, but he was deeply mistaken if he thought she'd ever open the Valley Arch for him. Evangeline would find a way to cure Apollo on her own. Then she'd make sure that Jax never hurt anyone else ever again. Jax was not her friend, but she taught her that she could open any door she wanted, and Evangeline knew exactly which door she needed to open next. Chapter 54, Once Upon a Broken Heart. In another part of Wolf Hall, a door that had not been opened for centuries began to stir. Its hinges creaked, its woods ground, and the wolf's head, emblem carved upon its center, curved its mouth into a smile.